Okay, good evening, members. We're going to make a start with the recording notice for the open meeting. We need to ask any members or officers in physical attendance with electronic devices to mute it to avoid feedback. Any remote participants, can you please keep your microphones off unless you wish to speak? See, we've got Councillor Hunt and Councillor Neal online, so don't forget to raise your hands, and I will try to ask officers to look out for you to make sure that we allow you to discuss items if you wish to do so. Please note the meeting is being recorded and that staff may use body-worn cameras within the premises. Data captured during these recordings will be processed and retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy, and the meeting recording may be published on the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their SBC or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. Okay. So, welcome everyone to the Environmental Services and Climate Change Committee meeting, and welcome to any councillors and members of the public joining us remotely this evening. In addition to the members of the committee, we have the following officers in attendance with us this evening. Head of Environment and Leisure, Martin Cassell, Environmental Services Manager, Alistair Andrews, GIS Manager, Daniel Pease, Seafront and Engineering Manager, Mike Knowles, Active Transport Officer, Michelle Anderson, Environmental Enforcement Manager, Michelle Sampson, Democratic Services, Kelly Mackenzie. Have I left anybody out that I haven't spotted? No? Okay. Please be advised there is no fire drill this evening. If the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Do not use the lift. If anyone in attendance requires extra assistance, please make yourselves known to us so that we can assist. Okay. Right. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Sarah Stephen. Her substitute is Councillor Derek Carnell. Councillor Paul Stephen. His substitute is Councillor Tom Nundy. Councillor Claire Martin. Councillor Pete Neal. Councillor Charlie Miller. Councillor Peter MacDonald has taken the vacancy seat. Councillor James Hunt, he's joining remotely. Thank you.
Lovely, and we've got Councillor Whiting, a visiting member this evening. Welcome, and just an extension of welcome to Councillor MacDonald. Thank you for taking a vacancy, and obviously nice to see you as ever. Right. Okay, do I need to tell people that, or? Okay, so the live stream is not working on YouTube. We are looking at getting it restarted. There we go. Technical glitches sometimes happen, do they not? Right then, so if we look at the minutes for the previous meeting, can you, are we all agreed to accept the minutes for the previous meeting? Happy to have them signed off with no alterations. Okay, Councillor Marchington, just checking you're happy. Yep. Lovely job. Okay, that's passed. Excellent. And then we move on to declarations of interest, please. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. As I previously declared it at the meeting when we discussed the LC Whip, I've been a volunteer with the Sheppey Light Railway Green Path, so non-pecuniary. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, I haven't been a voter tonight, but I've been appointed as a trustee of the Greenway, Sheppey Light Railway Greenway Group as well. So,
congratulations, well for a project. Thank you for letting us know. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know whether I've got to declare it, but I'm a member of the Sheppey Coastal Protection Group, which is a charity and a CIC. So we're very interested in coastal erosion, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Okay then, so on declarations of interest, let's move on to item 5, matters arising. Are there any matters arising? No, nothing. No, lovely job. turning over my paper. Okay, so item number 6, Chair's briefing, and I'm pleased to tell you, members, I'm very proud of this fact. I've actually managed to get a proper copy of the Chair's update, because I'm very pleased with the amount of work I do in between meetings on everyone's behalf, and the work that goes on that I'm not part of on behalf of everyone, actually. So since the previous environment meeting, I wanted to update members of some of the Chair's updates. I've attended the Chairs and Vice Chairs meeting to support work cross-committee, which is where the Bartons Point Working Group sits. I've attended and chaired the Bartons Point Working Group as directed through this committee. Meetings have been well attended and have been looking at a variety of matters, including issues generated from the impact of the ecology report that has been shared with members previously. Looking at the existing activity on site and future guidance for the area is incredibly important to protect the potential Green Flag Park and its unique habitat and place within the Sheppey community. Recommendations from the working group will look at the offering on site, work with stakeholders that are already on site, events in the future, as well as key elements like environment, including the water habitat. A full Officers' report will come back to both Environment and Economy Committee to allow members the best opportunity to take work forward in the interest of wildlife and, of course, residents. The last meeting had a site visit, and the next meeting will include engagement with stakeholders. All members of the working group have expressed strong wishes that perhaps an annual meeting with stakeholders continues on site, supporting engagement, and SWAL showing a regular leadership role in providing a positive future for the area as the land owners. I visited Stones Farm Country Park to support tree planting in the area. Lots and lots of people from all age groups attended, and it was really great to catch up with the SWAL Ranger to hear all about the good work. Listening to how outdoor opportunities have benefited young people who started with volunteering, meaning we at SWAL still have room to look past budget concerns to make every investment count in our communities. Special thanks goes to our hardworking ranger and those staff that support that position because it is unique. We only have the one. As part of the Great British Spring Cleans, SWAL has organised some litter picks in various places through the borough. I attended one at Garrison Point in Sheerness, and I'm looking forward to attending one at Bartons Point on Friday at 10 till 12. I also know that our Vice Chair attended both Garrison Point and Thistle Hill. Everyone is welcome, and there is always opportunity to organise a community event in your ward at a later date by speaking to officers for guidance. I've also attended a presentation from the Crown Estates organised by the Coastal Erosion Special Interest Group, and I've attended another one of their meetings with a range of topics being discussed, including work around emergency planning and water safety, which all helps councils work together to find common goals and ways of collaborating on national issues like coastal erosion. We have received a response on the public convenience letter that we sent to the Secretary of State from a representative. That's in your notes for the meeting. Whilst the government doesn't intend to include toilets in their statutory responsibilities, they do understand why we have raised the issue. They point to other support potentially being offered to support this concern, including national funding and possible reallocation of business rate relief. Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions or comments based on the Chair's update item. Nope, nobody. Right then. So, items for noting. Item 7, forward decision making plan. I'd like members to note the forward decision making plan. Has anybody got any questions or comments on that before it is duly noted? Lovely. Everybody agreed to note the forward decision making plan. Lovely job. Right. Item number 8, street naming and numbering policy refresh. Please could the officer introduce the report, please?
Hi there, good evening. My name's Dan Peace, our GIS manager for Swale Borough Council. I look after mapping, addressing and street naming and numbering, and the purpose of my report is basically a refresh a very old policy, and just to make sure the council fulfils its statutory responsibilities. As I said, the council are legally responsible for approving and creating addresses, and GeoPlace is a central source for the UK addressing and provides us with the framework to meet these responsibilities. They used to be focused on mainly addressing, and then a couple of years ago, after lots of meetings, I think they all realised that the demand on street naming and numbering had been rather neglected, and we all kind of get together, all the LAs, to make sure we're on the same page, because there was a lot of grey areas, a lot of decisions open to challenges, and basically holding up the process. Now, the demand on accurate addressing for emergency services, utilities, has never been more, and hopefully this policy will just make it clear for developers and clear for individuals how we go about things, and to avoid delays. And that's basically it. Welcome any questions, please.
Councillor MacDonald, your hand was up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just it's been pointed out to me that on page 24 there's a slight mistake in 13.1 where it says with the relevant lead member, but in actual fact that it's a committee, not a lead member, because it's not it's only a small thing, but we may as well show everyone we're right. Oh, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Councillor Jays?
Thank you, Chair. At 5.5, it says it is a policy of the council to consult with appropriate local ward councillors. And in our previous policy from 2012, it says exactly the same. I've had a number of roads named in my ward, and I have not been consulted. So the council's already ignoring its policy, probably for the last 14 years, which is disappointing. But I hope this refresh will mean we'll actually do things as per the policy. I too noticed the portfolio holder, and perhaps can change that to chair. At 5.17, it mentions about fees. I just want to check, are these fees in our fees and charges?
Excellent questions.
Okay, first of all, I apologise that you haven't been consulted. I don't know why you should. I'll have to speak to my officers and find out whether you're not on the distribution list or whatever's happened there. But you should be. So I will take note of that and make sure that happens. In terms, sorry, could you repeat about the fees and charges?
Yes, so at 5.17 it says about the fees, and I was just wondering if they're in our published fees and charges that we set.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Okay.
And we get they're reviewed all the time. We try to keep them in line with all the other authorities in Kent.
So my question is a little bit about that, but slightly different. When we're talking about renaming of roads and things like that, I too haven't had across my desk any sort of interest in asking ward councillors about naming or being involved in that process. Where does that process start and finish? I'm assuming it's triggered by a point in the planning process, if it's a new build estate or something of that nature.
Yeah, so like a new build, we'd get notified through planning, and the developers are pushed. You need to contact street naming and numbering to start the process. We like to get it done as early as possible, just to avoid delays. And what would normally happen? The developers would suggest 3 names. My officer would review and make sure they're appropriate, hopefully with some historical reference or a meaning behind it. These should be passed by email to the ward councillors for you to discuss.
Okay, so I'm hearing murmurings around the road. Can any ward councillor in the room tell me if that's been your experience, with just a simple nod or no? Okay, so I think we can do this differently. So we're starting a new policy. That's really good news. That's great. What I would say is that I believe, as it's coming under my committee, I will want to be CC'd into all correspondence with ward councillors so that I can follow the process through, and I can see where that policy is going to work in future brilliantly in informing ward councillors and making sure we've got the right communication there, because that is I think a relatively good sample of councillors across the borough in here. If we're not receiving that sort of communication, we need to find out where the stoppage point is. It may just be an email issue, I don't know, but we need to follow the process through. And as we've got quite a lot of planning applications and things coming through, I imagine it shouldn't be too long before I can follow the process through and just make sure, and also encourage ward councillors to take part in the process as well, so that we're getting support from both ends.
Absolutely.
Is that suitable for members? Would you feel that that's a good way forward? Lovely. Do we need to put that in recommendations, or can I just ask politely for that to happen?
I'm comfortable that we cover it in the minutes, Kelly, and it doesn't need to be a recommendation unless the committee feels strongly.
Fantastic. Lovely job. Okay. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Nundy.
I don't think Elliot had finished, but obviously I do want to jump in afterwards, so I'll let him finish off what he was going to say.
Apologies, Councillor Jays. Sorry about that. Please finish.
That's okay. I don't think this is unique to GIS. I think licensing was still consulting on the pre-2015 boundaries until fairly recently. So I think it takes a while for things to catch up. My other comment was 15.15. We've got organisation with a Z. I think that's the American spelling, but I think that's very minor. I've also got, what else have I got? Have I got anything else? So organisations we notify, it says British Gas. Obviously they're not the British Gas pre-Margaret Thatcher that run the country. Obviously we've got a gas board in the area, which is SGN. Should they be notified? I know UK Power Network aren't on here. We've got Southern Water. Does South East Water need to be notified?
I think my office always updates the distributionists. Our Southern Gas Network does get notified. I can. All I can say is I can have a complete refresh of that update and get back to you with who needs to be notified. If you feel I'm really missing someone off that address list, I can certainly do that. Yeah.
Obviously, as a committee, we're a critical friend, so that's why we're scrutinising this report and obviously giving you the feedback.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Sometimes obviously councillors can come across not in the right way. The other thing is about reviewed annually. Will that be reviewed by yourselves annually, and anything significant would then be brought back to the committee? Because I don't think we need to see this annually. It hasn't been seen for the last 14 years. Is that the approach being taken?
I think if, from the guidance from GeoPlace, only if something really, really changes.
Noting we've only got 2 years left, but yeah.
Yeah, that was the intention. It's the review annually is a standard clause in our policy template, and it's basically requiring the officers to have a look. Has any of the legislation changed? So there was the recent Levelling Up Act that we picked up in our review. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Jays. Unless something major changes, we wouldn't bring it back to committee yearly.
At 9.3, is that a typo, or am I just not reading it right?
It's a typo. I spotted it earlier.
No, yeah. What's it meant to say? Remade?
Rename.
Rename. Okay, no, just cool.
I mean, I'd like to say that we popped the odd one in for you to find, Elliot, but unfortunately that is one we missed.
Sorry, Martin.
I just need to ask one more question. So as this will be a policy that will go forward and inform work of potentially whatever the new council looks like, have we made every effort to standardise this policy so that, for example, when the new council takes over, whoever the councillors are, this could be one less little job for them if these policies are standardised across the councils, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm part of the GIS Kent Forum, and we have these discussions to try and keep all our fees and charges in line, all our kind of policies. Most of the people on there from Kent, attendees, have attended all these workshops at GeoPlace to come up with these policies and similar policies. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident if we had to share it with other Kent councils, it wouldn't be a problem.
And my last point, which I put on all policies, have we done everything we can to add on to the policy at the bottom? For example, if people wanted to, I don't know, developers wanted to register, or they looked at the website, they looked at the policy, is there anything links we can add to the policy if it's going to be online, where they can just click on and go to the referral form or get access to the process? Because it finishes on 16 review. I'm not seeing that there's any sort of linkage. Could we put that on for the online version?
I don't see why not. Yeah.
That's all right. I ask it about every single
Just
policy
tidies
I come
everything up,
across.
yeah. Okay.
Lovely. Unless anybody's got anything else, Councillor Nundy?
Thank you, Chair. So, paragraph 4.3, it states, to shorten the road name process, it is recommended that the developer consults with the local community, parish and town council and local councillors for suggested names for new roads prior to submission. But then at 5.5, it says it is the policy of the council to consult with the appropriate local ward councillor and parish or town council on proposed street and road names. Why is that being done twice? Because if you know, if the developers are doing it and then that's the stuff that's being put forward, then that's fine. But if we're saying that the developers might not put the suggestions of the parish and town council forward, surely having that bit about the developer doing it is null and void. Because if the council are going to do it anyway, surely that's a better way of doing it, unless there have been delays in parish councils getting back to the council.
I think you're right. There has been delays, and sometimes in the past developers have chose to ignore us and try to do their own thing. We know when an application lands on our desk, we normally encourage the developers to speak, because we want everyone to be happy and we want everyone to be smooth. But there has been occasions where it's all done last minute and people have missed parish meetings. So yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't really got anything to say on that.
That's okay. Let's bring Martin in quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, Councillor Nundy. I think what we're saying in the first statement is we'd like you as developers to talk to those people. We can't force them to do that. So what we're putting in our policy is, if you don't bother, we will. Ultimately, that's why there's the two layers.
So is that a new addition to the policy then, that the council consult with parish and town councils? Or was that in the old policy as well?
I think previously it was only about renaming rather than naming, because when you first read the policy, I got quite confused by renaming, because it reads the same, but they have been slightly different. For instance, the legislation talks differently about renaming compared to naming, and so there are a few nuances there in the report on that. But from our point of view, what we're saying is that those two statements say we'd like you to have a chat with the relevant historical society, the town council, the ward councillors, etc. But if you don't, we're going to.
Okay, thank you. And the only other question I've got is, how will the council measure whether the refreshed policy results in an improvement?
Sorry, improvement as in...
Well, if you update a policy, you update it to improve it, to make it better. But how is that going to be measured?
So,
Because if there have been delays, if there have been issues with consultations in the past, if there have been complaints made about the process, how is that going to be measured? What's the sort of long-term, medium-term?
That's an interesting difference in approach to policy, because my interpretation of policy is that actually it's reflective of the working practices of the organisation that it's in. No good, no bad, no increase, no decrease, just absolutely needs to work for the organisation it's in. But maybe officers have got a different opinion on that.
I think in the past, because as you rightly said earlier, our policy is so old. There was a couple of grey areas, especially on naming, and my team are really happy that we get this policy, because then we can go to the developer and go, no, you're not allowed to call the road this. It's in our policy. Let's move on. Whereas before, we had quite a few challenges, and to be fair, you just go round and round in circles. People move in, trying to get utilities, complaints, all the rest of it. At least I'm confident, I think Martin as well, everything we've got in this policy, if we're challenged, we can go, look, that's the policy, deal with it, we have to move on. Because it's 20 years ago, it's not, there wasn't loads of streets being named and a demand and addressing. Now my team has never been more busy, especially like with a local plan and developments coming in. We need to get them in, get them addressed. More importantly, get them addressed accurately, let everyone know and move on. So in answer to your question, it's probably, you won't see the delays and the time consuming different complaints. That's where a lot of my time is spent. And I didn't really have the tools to argue some of these complaints, but hopefully we'll do now.
That sounds good. Right, Councillor Jay's last one, and then we've really got to move on.
Yeah, my only last comment is it going to have a nice glossy corporate front cover?
Yes, by the time it makes it onto the website, comms will have made it look prettier than I ever can.
Lovely. Right, okay, can I get a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Jay's happy to propose?
As long as we're changing portfolio holder to chair, yes.
What I've tried to do, I mean, portfolio holder, I get is an outdated term, and I'm annoyed that I missed that. But what I was trying to do with lead member is keep it open, because obviously there is guidance nationally that we will all have to go back to a cabinet process at some point. So rather than keep needing to change portfolio holder, cabinet member, committee chair, I was trying to go for a generic term of lead member. However, I'm happy to be guided by the committee, and I'll put whatever you want me to put in there.
Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm going to challenge that. We're not in a cabinet makeup for this council. We're unlikely, I would say, to change before the council reorganises itself. So I think, if you wouldn't mind, we'd like to see that change to chair. Thank you. Lovely job. Right, thank you. So you're happy to propose, Councillor Jays? Can I get a seconder? And before I move on, Councillor Whiting, I'm assuming that's my comments were going to be vaguely the same as yours.
They were exactly that, other than whether it's chair or committee is the thing, because the committee is the decision maker, not the chair, but that's down to your members.
Lovely. And did we get a seconder? We did. Councillor Lundy. Right, all in favour? So that's unanimous. I'm looking at. Sorry, Councillor Shell, that was a support, was it? Yep, just making sure. Don't want to leave anybody out. Okie dokie, let's move on to the next item. So, item 9, Coastal Communities Engagement Planning Update. Can we have Officer to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report is an update following the report that went to members back in March of last year. And the subsequent recommendation from that meeting that officers should focus on engagement and supporting residents affected by coastal erosion. This report gives a recommendation for members to discuss the contents of the report and agree which principles of the proposed community engagement plan they would like us to move forward with. So basically, agreeing the principles that are in the document around the engagement plan, and to agree which engagement approach they would like us to undertake. The three options being a passive, an active approach, or a midway approach between the two. The report goes into further details around predicted costings and the work that's taken place to date, but I'm obviously more than happy to answer any specific questions in relation to the report. Thank you.
Lovely. I do take the point members want to ask questions on this, and I've got a visiting member that would like to speak, and Councillor McDonald, I know you've already registered that you would like to speak. Just to confirm though, I'm never whether sure to use officer's first name, so Mike, if that's okay. Can you just clarify for me, what would you say the level of engagement we have at the moment at Swale? I'm obviously aware that this is different, but from your perspective, what have we already got that we are offering?
With regard to communities at risk of coastal erosion, there's been very little engagement to date. Obviously, we will support residents when we receive inquiries, but there has been no proactive engagement with the communities to date. Thank you.
Just one more question. What is the obligation for this council in terms of, is there a statutory responsibility here? Is this something that we are doing because we feel it's the right thing to do, and there is nothing wrong with this council doing things that it feels is the right thing to do?
Yes, I'm quite happy to be corrected should I be wrong. But my understanding is that we, as a local coastal risk authority, don't have any obligation to undertake active engagement with communities. But obviously, I think it's safe to say that there will be a desire from everybody to engage with these communities and to offer as much assistance as we can in terms of the issues around coastal erosion. Thank you.
I was just going to clarify. So ultimately, in answer to your first question, we're currently doing the passive approach, which is some fixed information on the website, and that's it. So that's what we're currently doing. There's 3 options: passive, midway, active, and that's what we'd like.
I think that's what I was after, just to
Committee
make
to
sure
discuss
that, for
tonight,
instance,
yeah.
we were absolutely sure that if members voted for the passive option, thinking that they were going to see some form of changes, you won't. It will be exactly what's offered at the moment. So if we take the visiting member first, Councillor Whiting, you...
Not on this issue.
Oh, I do apologise. I'm
Next one.
sorry. Is it the Greenway? Sorry, apologies. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, obviously I'm extremely interested in coastal erosion. My father was a geologist and a geographer, and obviously with my naval training I know all about tides and things like this. Our Sheppey Rural District Council, long before Swale was, or even merged to make Queenborough with Sheppey, Sheppey Rural Council, before the war, put some groins in at the Lees, where the Lees was eroding, and that prevented it because it's a well-tested system right from Victorian times, and it does actually work. Now, I know Swale couldn't possibly afford the funding for that, but it basically needs a bit of a policy change, and that's not by you, it's by the Environment Agency, which really don't want to do anything anyway, except spend their money. You may remember that the Environment Agency on the Swale frontage wanted to abandon all the sea defences to stop high tides from coming in through the back door from Shellness to Queenborough. And there was a meeting, which obviously they haven't had one since, probably because I caught them out. They were going to abandon all those sea defences, particularly from the bridge to Queenborough. And of course, it would have left the back door open. Well, even if an idiot like me knows that, then quite frankly, those professional people ought to. And I objected to them. I was the last speaker. I was a stakeholder, and they haven't had any stakeholders since because they were, I think, because they were caught out. And I think we've got to protect ourselves. And basically, the frontage. Okay, that's been done. They've now got a responsibility, and they couldn't alter their policy. The policy for the frontage is no intervention. There is funding available from the Environment Agency, but we need that policy to change. I've got the various policies which are way out of date. That's why I brought them. And I think I accept that Swale would not be in a position to do any work, but it's completely unnecessary. We've got
So just to let you know, Councillor MacDonald, in my chair's update, I spoke about the
Yeah, I did.
coastal erosion special interest group. So we are absolutely not just looking at this one-handed. We are looking at this. We've got the work on the shoreline management plan. We fully intend to try and have a better relationship and force a better relationship with the Environment Agency, to be all honest with you. And it's not just on coastal erosion, it's for other things as well. For example, fly tipping. We know that the Environment Agency are active in the area. And maybe you would be happy to liaise with me so that, for instance, I can update you on the SIG group work. So I will update the committee as well. But I'm always very interested in your absolute experience on this matter. Do you mind if I bring Martin in just quickly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. Obviously, we've had many a conversation about this matter. I think, obviously, prior to you coming onto the committee, a couple of committees ago, this committee voted not to change the policy and not to continue to try to change the policy. So that's not what's in front of you tonight. What the council has said is, we've tried, we've written to the Secretary of State, MPs have lobbied, we've tried to go through the coastal group. I just didn't want the committee to go ahead thinking that that is something that officers are actively working on, changing the policy. We're not. This committee agreed not to continue doing that and to look at how we engage the impacted communities. So I just wanted to be clear to the committee, that's not what we're talking about tonight.
I would imagine what I'm really interested in with regards to Councillor MacDonald's comments is the fact that when we're looking at these national pushes, for example, how policy is going through other areas that are affected, it's really interesting because sometimes when these things affect you, you think, oh, coastal erosion. There are many other councils that are having many conversations around this subject. And I think SWAL is actually leading on some of these issues with regards to wanting to take this conversation forward to residents so that we're not just being reactive, we are being proactive. So I'm certainly not cutting down your conversation. Martin is right with what the committee has done before. And for example, I can absolutely say nationally, councils are having the same conversations with government. They're not changing their opinion with regards to how different areas are supported, and there's definitely not enough resources for all the areas that are affected at all. Right, so Councillor Moddart, I'm going to go to Councillor Hunt, or would you like to
I'm
finish
just
quickly?
going to comment on that and say that I'm very disappointed that you decided not to get, because I was told that money left over in the Environment Agency couldn't be put onto any projects because of our policy. So I think the policy actually needs to be changed, even if you can't do anything about it. Because, obviously it has been worked on before the war by other authorities that represented Sheppey. And quite frankly, it is a soluble problem slowly. It's not going to happen overnight. And the Environment Agency only get £1.4 million a year. And they do have a surplus very often, which they then spend quickly on anything. To get rid of the money so they don't get cut down. So I'd like to be in the position to jump in and say, right, this small project needs to be done. As you know, Swale did allow us to do a limited project at Eastchurch Gap, which would have worked, but unfortunately vandalism and also the fact that Southern Water didn't find, or so they didn't find, a burst 3-inch water main which pumped out millions of gallons of water into the cliff and made it unstable. So the longshore drift is the thing we need to stop.
I absolutely, I completely understand. That's probably something we need to take up outside of this meeting because it's effective on this on the agenda item. That's all. Yeah, Martin.
Sorry to come back, but I would refer you to the link in this report which was the previous report that explains exactly why we aren't able to change that policy. So I don't want to be going on thinking we're going to be changing the policy.
Yep, I understand that, and I take your comments, Councillor MacDonald, as well. Even having an opinion, expressing an opinion, is absolutely what we're here to do. But the committee has made decisions, and at the moment, that's the line we're running on. Doesn't mean to say that there is no room for change going forward, but at the moment, that's what we're on. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hunt now because he's been waiting very patiently online. Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. And apologies I can't get there this evening. Just on this, I sort of wasn't too sure on this because obviously not being an Island member, so I took it to the group for a group view on it. And the general sort of consensus on it is to not do the active engagement on this. There was some concerns, probably a bit of an unpopular opinion would be that people have bought houses in an area where they know that there is coastal erosion. Some of the properties that they think, well, I don't know if any of them can actually get mortgages, and you're buying a property knowing that there is issues with there at that area. So there was some concern about spending money on something that the council doesn't necessarily have to be doing. Obviously, there hasn't been much engagement at the moment. So whether it's to stay as we are or a midway point if we really do need to do a bit more engagement. But although I'm unable to vote. The general view was that we don't go for active. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Anybody else? Councillor Lundy.
Thank you, Chair. So, the first question that I have is about the number of homes that are currently at risk. So I know that it directs people to the SMP tool, but for us to make a decision on this, because if this is only something that's going to affect, say, 10 houses, or maybe even less than that, but we're actually spending £80,000 on the active option, perhaps isn't the same level of value for money that it would be if there were more houses at risk. If there's 100 houses at risk, then that is a substantially better ratio for funding. I also realise that in terms of a house being at risk, sorry, just to clarify, in terms of a house being at risk, it may not be at risk by prediction for another 30 or 40 years, but that doesn't mean that it isn't at risk. Perhaps within the next 5 years, maybe, if that's an available stat.
Would you like to come back on that?
In terms of it's very much a best guess scenario, unfortunately, because obviously there is no hard and fast. There will be a certain amount of metres per year lost to coastal erosion. And indeed, we can have years when there are no properties affected. And then, as we saw in the events of May 2020, we very quickly lost one property within the space of 24 hours. Having said that, I think we initially, the engagement plan is aimed at the Eastchurch area. The shoreline management plan information and the SMP Explorer deliberately doesn't draw a distinctive line around property boundaries for that very reason, that it is not an exact science and will give a risk erosion area as opposed to a set number of properties at risk. I would say with the Eastchurch area in the next 5 years, there could be no properties lost. There could be 4 or 5 properties lost. It's so very difficult to predict, and I think this has always been the issue. I think obviously the plan is as well as looking at initially the Eastchurch area, whichever policy is adopted through this process, I think we would then look to be using in other areas of coastal erosion as well within the Isle of Sheppey. So not just focusing entirely on the Eastchurch area, but that's the initial focus. Thank you.
Thank you. I represent obviously a ward on Sheppey, so this really is a very important. And I appreciate that the stats aren't, you weren't able to provide it, but I fully accept your explanation. And thank you. That was quite a thorough answer. I don't really buy into the argument that people have bought houses knowing that they might erode, because they could have bought those houses 50 years ago. And to be honest, coastal erosion has been getting worse over the past few years. An Englishman's home is his castle. People should feel safe where they live, and they should have access to the best advice about what to do. The only other question that I do have is paragraph 2.12 says would require funding for a full-time engagement officer, initially on an 18-month fixed-term contract with possible casual staff and venue rental costs for, this is going to cost 80 grand. Well, later on at 6, it says that it's going to be a 12-month proposed to have a coordinator post at grade 7 initially for 12 months at a cost of 74,000 plus a small working budget of 5 grand. Well, the small working budget of 5 grand, I'm quite satisfied that would cover hiring, a couple of agency staff maybe to come and help staff the event, hiring security for the events, things like that. But in one part of the report, it's saying 18 months at a cost of 80. Well, if you're taking the 5 grand away, is it a 12-month contract that's going to be offered, or is it an 18-month contract? And is that salary, is that grade, because I don't have an intimate understanding of the staff grading systems at Swire Borough Council, but is for an engagement officer, is that a comparative band perhaps on a similar project that has taken place perhaps around active travel or community safety?
Mark? Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, well spotted. That is a typo in item 6. So it is based upon 18 months, and that is not necessarily the full amount that is paid to the employee, but it includes all of the on costs of provision, pension, etc., etc. So yes, it is in line. The engagement officer, although we haven't taken it to job evaluation, so it's an estimate in the budget. And we should say that in the budget that you've just agreed for 26-27, the 80k is in there. So the budget provision is there if you want it, but clearly the committee can decide not to use that, and that can be used elsewhere. So so that is 18 months, just to be clear, and it is the costs of employing the person and the salary, and within that amount. I hope that answers the question. If I can come back on one thing Mike responded in terms of the question. You're absolutely right. It's very difficult to show the exact amount, but what we are aware is there's 30 or 40 properties in that area. So whilst in the shorter term, some of those it will be a lower number of properties. The view is that all of those properties in that area will be within the coastal erosion zone at a certain point. And it picks up on something you said, Councillor Nundy, which is if we looked at it short term and said it was only, at the moment we're regularly engaging with 2 properties there, it will likely become 4 or 5 pretty quickly. But people are making decisions about purchasing or not purchasing houses now that will hopefully, they think, last them for a lifetime. So making a decision on the immediate risk is not necessarily, because we can engage a wider amount of people. It won't just be we're talking to 4 or 5 people. We would talk to everybody in the Eastchurch area if we did it. So yeah, it's difficult. Short term, we can go, it might be 0, it might be 4, it might be 5. But the point is, longer term, all of the properties in that area will be at risk at a point, possibly beyond our lifetime.
So if you're saying that this is going to benefit up to 40 properties that you would be going to speak to, then that is a far better cost effectiveness for an 18-month project than if it was 2 or 3 that you're currently regularly engaging with. So that does clarify a couple of points for me. Thank you.
Just checking my 30 or 40 is correct, Mike. Yes, it is.
Can we also just clarify for the committee's benefit? We were talking about these homes as being homeowners. these properties don't necessarily have the homeowners living in them. They could be rented. They could have squatters in. They could have an element of homelessness in the area. So this project doesn't just necessarily sit around these properties. It should be centred on the people that inhabit that area, so that the widest support is offered, because these people may have taken out tenancies on these properties completely unaware of what the situation is. I don't know how they would be, because the road just falls away, but that's not really their concern. If they're looking for cheap rental, they may actually have taken out a 6-month tenancy or something of that nature, whatever the government says it is. I'm just saying, we just need to be mindful where it may not be homeowners that are the only people that are affected by this. Can we go to Councillor Thompson next, please?
Yeah, I think some of it's been covered anyway, but I just wondered how many are caravan sites or holiday lets, because going back to what Dolly said, and how far does our border go to Graveney around to Sea Salter, because that's obviously another highlighted area. But the thing I've commenting on for me is that with the Lower Medway Internal Drainage Board, the information we've got there and the information we have here and what we know, I think we had it when we had a sea level rise assessment last year. I think we had a emergency meeting, didn't we, about this particular subject? Can't remember when it was now. Mike might know. But it was then cited that it could, worst case scenario was 250 homes. I think, a bit like Dolly said, if we look at the possibility there might be loss of life, then we need to be seen to be making an effort. And going back to what I think Tom mentioned about people buying homes, and some of them getting upset because they then find out it's not worth anything. It mitigates us from being to blame for that if we've made a bit more effort around informing people of these risks. But it's interesting as well, looking at the 100-year risk. We've now entered that zone since 1950s when it was a 5.8 metre rise, and that was quite catastrophic. So we probably need to make people aware, make the effort to make people aware, even if it isn't a duty. I think some sort of midway active engagement at least, maybe, but it's just my opinion.
So from discussions of members so far, just as a little bit of a summary, what I can hear coming back from members is that actually we've got 3 options in front of us, but actually this is dictated by timeline, isn't it? So, for example, you might have, if it's already been budgeted for, we know that the money is there for it. It's just, when is that urgent support potentially? The most cost effective is to have a little crystal ball so that we know when disaster is about to affect, and we actually kick this higher level in 6 months before that, so people have got a decent amount of time to be considering it. That's unfortunately not going to happen, but it's well worth thinking that there might be a staged approach potentially. Councillor Shao, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we need to do something, because we can't just sit on our hands and watch houses fall into the sea. That is not why we were elected to sit here this evening. But spending all that money when we don't actually know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen does seem a little bit crazy. Have we thought about going and holding public meetings with Eastchurch Parish Council and them inviting residents in? And could we not take it to the area panel, although they're not area panels now, whatever the new wacky name is for them, and have a whole item agenda for coastal erosion on the Island Councillor Forum body board meeting thingy, where residents can come, because then we're not actively spending an awful lot of money, but we're engaging some of them just to test the water and get the ball rolling.
Martin?
I'm going to pick that one up because that's I've only got a mic, and Mike does 80% of his time putting yellow lines on roads and dealing with resident petitions and things like that. So whilst I absolutely recognise that, Councillor Shield, the reason that we've come here saying, look, we can do this, But if we do this, we need a particular resource for that, because if we just went to a area committee, I'm always going to call them that because I can't remember the name. If we went to an area committee, the danger is, so there's two parts to your question. I think you were right in saying we could do all of this engagement, and if all of those property owners say, thanks for telling me, but I'm going to stay where I am, we've achieved nothing, haven't we, other than we've imparted a bit of education. So you could look at it at that extreme, or you could look at it, we go and open Pandora's box and suddenly everyone wants to engage with us and we don't have the resource to do it. So I think that's why we've said the 3 tiers, which is passive, which you are doing at the moment. If somebody of their own accord comes into the council, they get directed to Mike, he directs them to the website and says, here's a load of information that you can read about where you're looking at a house. So that's passive. The midway one is actually we create a resident pack with a load more information that's sort of more user friendly, shall I say, than the Environment Agency and various coastal prediction lines and things. So we would make it, as you can see in the engagement plan, there's loads of things, so yes, of course we would engage Eastchurch Parish Council, Warden, etc. We've already had a number of conversations with them through the process since the emergency, so we're in a much better position with Eastchurch than we were pre-May 2020. But my concern is if we try and do a bit and we do it badly, I guess is my response. So that's why we're saying the 3 tiers is either we do what we do, which is a very small amount of Mike's time. We do a much more involved, user-friendly pack and set of information on the website, which is a one-off cost and a project. We're saying roughly 20,000, it might be less. Or we do, if we're going to start doing all of the community meetings, what we're saying is we don't have the existing resource to do that. So that's why we've come with the 3 options.
So just to reassure you, Councillor Shell, just had a look. There appears to be around 30 to 40 different points of engagement that the pack is looking at. And for example, I know that from our other hat, Sheerness pays into Calc. There may be some access support around training or engagement around resilience training or something, understanding emergency planning or something of that nature. Maybe Eastchurch can be signposted towards that. I'm sure they already have that, to be honest with you, because they've already been through something like this before. And what my budget head says is that we know we've been through this before. This is almost like the second wave. We unfortunately had a family displaced really urgently, and the cost to this council was large. We had to adjust our housing list to accommodate. We had to move people down and around and whatever to make sure that the family could be accommodated, quite rightly be accommodated, and all the rest of the support that was needed. And I suppose what we really need to weigh up is proactivity versus reactivity, because unfortunately there will be a cost on both sides of that discussion, I would assume. I'm
happy to propose the midway approach.
So we have a proposer for the midway approach. Do we have a seconder? Job. Would anybody like to particularly speak on that? Councillor Jays?
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a question. On the legal statutory procurement bit, it says about different forms of notices, such as hazard awareness notice, prohibition notice, demolition order. Have we got to the stage, have we issued any of them in this area yet?
Yes, not my department, but I'm happy to try to answer that one. I believe it comes under the environmental team and the housing team in particular, rather. And we have issued 2 hazard awareness notices, I believe, on properties. The next stage is obviously when that property becomes unsafe to live in. that's when that would trigger the prohibition notice. But at the present time, I understand we have 2 hazard awareness notices in place.
Thank you for that, Mike. I think this is one of the toughest things we've got in front of us. At 2.8, it says the message from stakeholders is that poor engagement is worse than no engagement. I think it would have been nice if the ward members were here tonight. I'd really like to hear their views, but Councillor Hunt has said what his group and the ward members belong to his group, what they think, and that's the option that's being proposed. I think this is a tough one. I don't think we need recommendation 2 at all, do we? As it is a budgeted item, we could just go with recommendation 1. We don't need to ask for. We don't need to recommend a one-off fund. There is a one-off fund currently, or is that an additional pot you would like?
It's a great spot again. You can tell this report was written for the January committee, which would have been pre the budget decision. So you're absolutely right that the budget provision is there.
So we're just going with recommendation 2.
1.
1.
There is also a 4th option. We could have a part-time officer on this. I mean, there's plenty of other sections I'd like to spend the money on in your team, Martin. It's a lot of money for a small number of houses. If we're looking at if it's 40 properties, it's £2,000 we're spending on each property. Are they paying us £200 a year council tax? That's 10 years worth of their council tax. I know it's life and property is at risk here, but this 80k is a lot of money. We saw some unpalatable things going to the budget. Part of it was to make up this 80k because this was one of these additional options that suddenly appeared on the budget's 3rd or 4th outing. I'm happy to. Hopefully, there's further debate, but if not, we'll be voting on the proposal.
Well, this is the further debate based on this proposal. What I'm really interested to know is if we've budgeted this year, what is the likelihood of this funding being ring fenced so that we've got it to call on in subsequent years? So if members decide to go for the middle option and subsequently we need that support, higher level of support further on, will that money still be there? Or is it that, for instance, we engage the project officer right now, we don't need them this year, we pay them this year, and then suddenly we haven't got that resource to call on in subsequent years?
You want me to answer that?
I'm directing my question to officers, really.
So the provision is within this budget. So if you don't spend it in this year, members have the ability to say that they'd like to carry it forward to future years. But ultimately, I believe it was a one-off proposed in 26-27, and then in the medium-term financial plan comes out in 27-28. So therefore, it's not a recurring one. But you're absolutely able. Officers can request to carry unspent monies forward, as can members. So I hope that kind of answers it.
It does. I would probably go stronger and say that I would prefer this money to be ring fenced for solely this purpose. So if the money is carried forward, I don't think it's the right thing to do to be able to spend it on other things other than what the committee has decided. That I believe this role is necessary. From what I'm hearing, other committee members believe this role is necessary when it needs to be actioned. Absolutely. So what we'd be interested maybe is in the discussion about the proposal from Councillor Shell is to say that we're happy to vote on the middle option tonight, but have a trigger to be able to release the funding for a project officer should officer guidance deem it necessary that further support is needed, as the budget is there when and if it's necessary.
So just for clarity, before you bring the others in, I think what you're therefore proposing is, because remember the midway option is not about employing anybody. It's not employing an engagement officer to physically go out and talk to anyone. It's about making the information that we have in a far more presentable, community-facing way, so that residents can self-serve ultimately. So if we spend that, and what I think you're saying is there's then 60,000 left in the pot, could that be used at a later date for the active engagement? Clearly it wouldn't be enough to do it for the 18 months, but members set a budget once a year, so you can decide what you spend the money on. I don't think it's necessarily needs to be ring fenced. I think if members of this committee decide to do Midway tonight, then we would conduct that project ultimately, and then it's for members to decide at a later date if they want something else to happen.
I'm just suggesting that, for instance, if members decide that actually later on the active engagement approach is what is needed, it will be much easier to find £20,000 that we've already taken out for the current engagement strategy if it's picked, rather than refinding the £80,000 if we're not looking at carrying that money forward or somehow securing that money, because we've heard tonight several times the phrase, well, in my head when I read this, it's not if, it's when. So I'm really interested. I know we'll have potential inflation to deal with, wage increases to deal with, all of those sort of things, but I think it's much easier to find £20,000 than it is to find £80,000 when we're looking for it. Councillor Shell.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I totally agree. We managed to scrape the money from the bottom of the barrel for planning inquiries when we need to. So why can we not do it when our residents are looking at losing their houses they already have? In an ideal world, we'd have all the money to say, Martin, go and do all of it now, and then again in a couple of years' time, and again in a couple of years' time. My only worry is that if we sit here tonight and say, yes, let's spend the whole £80,000 on engaging, we'll do that, and your team are brilliant at doing it, and they'll get it done in that 18 months, and we'll have a nice flashy report. But then 30% of those residents could be renting, move out in the next 2 years. That information's not passed on, and your team's hard work has been for nothing, really, because most of the residents would have moved on, passed away, and that information not shared. West, as the chair has said, if we could trigger parts of it as and when is needed, as a risk assessment is taken from your brilliant officers, then that's much more sensible than us throwing everything at it to get nothing back, or residents to lose that information in 3 years' time when it's needed. When in 2 years' time, Mike might come to us and say, actually, we really need to push this now. Let's go for it. We've got the money. Let's push it. But we can always find money when we need to.
Take that point, Councillor Shell. Councillor Thompson.
This might be delusional, but is there any way that when people move in and they pay council tax, that the little map of the area then triggers with their council tax communication a response saying you are in a flood risk area? Just a little simple thing, as you were saying, that's easy to understand and is more accessible than a lot of the information now. Just wondered.
Yeah, I mean, we're going into the detail of an engagement plan. All of those types of things are possible. If someone was looking at it, they would be looking at lots of different ways of saying, I'm going to go to the area committee, I'm going to go to the parish council meeting, I'm going to hold a coffee morning in such and such location. So yeah, I mean, absolutely anything is possible. I mean, you would like to hope, I mean, clearly when you purchase a property, you should be doing that due diligence anyway. You get surveys, you get reports, etc. Clearly, it's different for those when they were talking about people going in as rentals or things like that. But yeah, you would hope that people are doing their due diligence on that, and if they did land searches, it does come back to say this is within a coastal erosion line, etc.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you. I did want to point slightly off the thing, but I did want to point out that there is a risk to the fairly new properties at Warden Bay, and so that's something that I've been looking at, and it, you know, so it's obviously going to be a quite a serious problem. So it can be solved, as I've said before. The Victorians showed us how to do that, and so it's a case of perhaps a slight policy change, which I would like to put forward, obviously at a later date. That I think we need to change a policy, otherwise I think we're negligent, quite frankly, because things are possible. So without ridiculous expense, and I know Swale wouldn't have the money, but there are other pots that can be financed.
Okay, so we've got proposal on the table, Councillor MacDonald. That's okay. Thank you for your point. Councillor Shao, your proposal that was on the table, did you want to leave the proposal as recommendation 1, choosing Midway, or would you like to include the wording? So, like, I'm not telling you, this is your proposal, not mine, with the option to carry the underspend forward for this project only.
Yes, I'm happy to change the word into that, and for us to trigger that extra ring-fenced funding as and when the risk assessment deems it necessary to engage further.
Okay, I'm looking at the more experienced members in the room. Councillor Connell, you've done a million of these. How does that wording sound to you? I'm asking your opinion about it, because lots of things sound great in my head, and then sometimes it's nice to have somebody else's opinion about it.
Yeah, the only thing that comes across is that if we use the 20,000, that would leave, say, 60,000. So if we want to activate it in a couple of years' time, we're only going to have 60,000, aren't we? Where are we going to get the extra money from?
We are, and obviously we don't know what future costs are going to be. So Mike has predicted or set up a case scenario where £80,000 is the predicted spend now, whereas actually come back in 2 years' time that could need another 5-10 grand. I don't know. Councillor Whiting?
If it helps, I would. You'd have to get some advice, I would suggest, Chair, about ring fencing money and carrying it over from one financial year to the next. I don't think without setting up a reserve you can do that, because that's the decision for P&R at the end of the day, and then full council when it comes to its budget. So you may be able to request it, but you may need to set up a reserve to put the money in a reserve, which can then be carried over from year in, year out. That would be, so I think it's a good idea to put the money aside for this, but at the same time, it's how within the Constitution you would ring fence it from one financial year to the next, and I think you'd need to take a little bit. I can see Martin nodding, but
yes,
that would be my little bit of experience counselling.
I would absolutely appreciate the guidance going forward. If you've got any pearls of wisdom, now would be the time to offer them. Brilliant.
I mean, it's never. You should never rely on me for the Constitution, as you know. However, I was listening to the debate and thinking exactly the same thing. I think this committee can make the decision. I think what I'm reading is, if you go for the Midway, which is create the information pack, etc., then we've got a resource there that can be used currently. I think if you're then proposing that you want to keep the money aside for the risk assessment, when the risk assessment deems it, then I think you're, rather than amend recommendation 1, you would need to create a new recommendation to say refer it to Policy and Resources Committee to make the decision.
I'm happy for that.
Are you? Just making sure. I don't want to enforce what my thinking is on other people. I do that in my own home far too many times. Right, so we're going for recommending option 1, recommendation 1, and then we're going to change recommendation 2 to referring the overspend
The remaining funds.
the remaining funds to P&R to plead our case to keep that money in reserve with our service lead in that department to make sure that we've got enough to come back with to look at further resource allocation if needed, depending on officer recommendation, if and when the emergency arises. And obviously it won't be the emergency, it'll be when officers deem that there is change, as opposed to if the worst happens, then we've left it too late, have we not? A little bit. So got a proposal. Did we get a seconder? Councillor Cannell, thank you very much. And before we take the vote, appreciate the advice received from members as well, and the fact that this is obviously cross-party work, which is absolutely what I like to see on these items, because we're supporting all residents, aren't we? Councillor Thompson.
Just for clarity, really. So which one are we proposing in terms of tier?
We are proposing the midway approach with the recommendation to P&R to ask for them to consider, make the decision about whether or not we can keep the money in reserve, the 60,000 for future work, potentially triggering extra resources for this project going forward. Is that clear? Is everybody clear on what we're just about to vote on? So all in favour? I'm also in favour.
Can you just
keep your hands up?
Sorry.
2,
1,
3,
2, 3,
6, 8, 9. Any against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions.
Yep.
Lovely job. Thank you very much, members. Right then, let's move on to item number 10. Thank you, Mike, for your time. Thank you. Right. Item number 10, Swale Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. Michelle, over to you.
Evening all. I'm Michelle Anderson. I'm the Active Travel Officer. I came to you back in July to this committee to present the draft LC Whip last year and to ask for permission to go out to public consultation. There was at the time one major change asked for by committee, and that is to include the SLRG route all the way through to Laysdown. And once that was in, then actually you agreed to proceed to public consultation. So I've come back today to say public consultation is completed. We did change the draft document to include that SLRG route, and public consultation took place between the 1st of September and the 26th of October. So the consultation consisted of a number of things. We had online maps, questionnaires, plus interactive pins on the maps as well that could have comments on. We had static stands in Faversham, Sittingbourne and Sheerness with paper questionnaires for those that could not access the webpage. I personally presented at all area committees and some parish council meetings as requested. I also personally emailed a number of main stakeholders as well, such as businesses on the routes, cycle clubs, etc., and invited them to also comment. Overall, there was better than expected levels of engagement seen. We had over 300 comments received across all of those methods. We had 34 completed questionnaires and over 260 active users onto the webpage. Now, overall, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and actually about 85% of respondents stated that the proposed changes in the paper would actually encourage them to walk or cycle more, which is exactly what we need. The feedback from the public was very welcome, but not only that, it was also really constructive. So it resulted in a number of changes in the paper as well. So, for example, the route that originally went under the railway bridge just here at Crown Key Lane, that teeny tiny little pathways, somebody actually said, well, why go through there? Why don't you just go up a little bit more into that industrial estate and go through there? And in all honesty, I kind of kicked myself that I hadn't seen that one. But yeah, so we changed that. Another example was on the island. It was suggested that we put an additional route between Kingsferry Bridge following an existing public right of way, and take that all the way over to Rushenden. Excellent suggestion. We've obviously included that. There have been a number of interventions that have been included, and the maps in the main documents will detail which are the additional interventions. Also, as part of the LCWIP process, and certainly always following active travel England guidelines, we then prioritise the routes based on those guidelines, and the top 5 walking and cycling routes can be seen in the papers supplied. The advantages of having an LC whip, I mean, obviously having a long-term published LC whip as a Swale Borough Council would actually give us a really robust plan for the future, for everyone. It has numerous health benefits, you know that, but actually the biggest advantage and the one that the real reason why we've progressed this so much over the last 18 months is actually this really is critical to secure funding from Active Travel England via KCC. So without an LC whip, we will basically receive nothing to improve any cycling or walking infrastructure. With an LC whip, it's a completely different story. So interestingly, I did have a call with KCC Active Travel team a couple of months ago, and they were talking about their priorities in terms of where they will allocate funding for the future. LC whip was number 1, but actually number 2 was they want to see local authorities really think seriously and really act seriously about their local infrastructure. And the willingness of a local authority is really key. And I'd like to point out that actually we're the only local authority in Kent, local council, that has an active travel officer full time. So that really bodes well if we can get this in. So my recommendation for all of the reasons above is, and also for the overwhelmingly positive feedback seen at consultation, is that you adopt this LC whip into council policy, and then we can put that onto our webpage. Any comments?
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Lundy.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate all the effort that you've put into the report that you've done and the clear engagement that you've done with some of the local organisations. But I can't say that it's a good response to the consultation, because there were like 300 and the adult population of Swale is probably about 90,000. So about 0.3% of the adult population responded to this. So I really think, members, that when we move forwards, when we have another consultation, it really is incumbent on all of us to push these consultations out to people, because 300 really isn't like a very good response, and it's possibly not reflective of how our residents feel. Particularly surrounding the Sheppey CWR Route 7, which is the one from Sheerness to Laysdown. Which route segments currently have secured landowner agreements? Because before the meeting there was a discussion. I spoke to Councillor Whiting and yourself, and it was about that was the plan, was to use sections of the Sheppey Light Greenway project to facilitate that, which is obviously something I would support. But what landowner agreements have been put in place already? What landowner agreements does Swale currently have?
I think probably Councillor Whiting can probably give you a little bit more detail about that, if I'm being honest with you. But what I will say is that, especially with the Sheppey Light Railway Greenway section, that's CWR7, is that it's such a long route. What we'd be doing, and it would cost millions to put it in, and we're talking a long time. So it would be sections. It would be have to be section by section. So, for example, we had some funding from Active Travel England this year, and we looked at just the East Church. How do we get through East Church? And we took some consultants out a couple of weeks ago with one of the committee members actually there to say, well, how would you design this section here? And also the same from Scrapsgate Road up to Elm Lane. We did the same thing on the same day. How would you do this section here? So you'd find it's very much sectional. And actually, by the time we actually do section by section by section, landowner permissions and the committee are very much working on getting landowner permission. And they do have some, but not all. I don't know whether, Mike, you want to elaborate on that, because you know that. Sorry,
Only
Councillor White.
with the chair's permission. Yeah, I mean, Michelle's absolutely right, Councillor Lundy. It will require a lot of private land to keep the route off of the main road, off of the various main roads that we know are particularly dangerous on Sheppey. The lower road is clearly the main one. Swale Borough Council owns some of the land up to around Thistle Hill. And there's a possibility there, and we've had discussions, or the group's had, I know has had discussions with council officers. There's discussions ongoing with 2 developers who own land that forms part of the route, who are very minded to assist best they can. I won't go into too many details about individuals, but there's other landowners that have already said, yes, of course, you can have my land to do it. So we're working on the basis that all of the route that is currently, say, the lower road, would be off of the lower road. There may have to be a crossing point at some point. Similarly with Jenkins Hill, the other side of Eastchurch. Again, trying to taking the route off of that. But there's a few miles to do. There's about 1.5 miles of the route that's been done already. I'm hoping the next mile, with the help of one developer at least, will get underway in the next couple of months. So yes, it's an iterative process, as Michelle said, if that answers or gives you reassurance.
That completely answers my question. I understand that project is going to take years and years to deliver, but I also understand from your perspective that it needs to be part of the active travel plan moving forwards. I do have one more quick question, if that's okay.
If you're quick.
So my understanding is that roads or cycleways need to meet criteria from the local transport note around cycle infrastructure design, and that if that isn't adhered to, the funding from Active Travel England wouldn't be given. So I suppose really what my question is, how many route sections that have been proposed don't meet that criteria? Because the lower road can't meet it at the moment because it's a death trap. It would be dangerous to cycle there. Obviously, the new route that would be proposed wouldn't be. So how many of the other routes that follow this meet that criteria? Because if they don't meet it and we then can't get the Active Travel England funding, then it's a very difficult job, essentially.
Great question. So the point of this plan is to say this is our what we would love to happen. Okay, so when you're getting to the point where we've taken consultants out, and especially on the island, they actually physically got on their bikes and rode them, by the way, as well. So they've done the initial feasibility studies on each of those routes, and the maps are also in the document as well. There are many stages of design. So there are a couple of routes on there. The Broadway Minster, Grove Park route in the Southwest Development and Sitting Bull, for example, have had more detailed what we call CAD design, computer assisted design. The next stage would be the real detailed design. What about the utilities? What underneath? So there's a number of levels of design where you delve deeper and deeper. And actually, it may come to the point at one of those design levels where you go, actually, this isn't doable and we have to do something else. So at the moment, on top level feasibility, all of these are possible. We didn't include the SLRG route in the original draft documentation for exactly the reason you said. The fact that we were asked to include it, subject to landowner permission, which I think is probably the right thing to do because that is our long-term aspiration, right? Then that's why it's in there. So there's lots of processes to still go down, but we have to have a plan to start with.
I absolutely agree. Thank you for establishing that. Thank you.
Right, so let's bring the visitor member in now. I'll just say, Mike, it's even written on my paper that I was supposed to call you first, so apologies.
No, thank you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to answer Councillor Nundy's question. Mine's very simple, really. I just want to say thanks to Michelle because it's clearly an awful lot of work. Going through Active Travel's hoops and jumping over Active Travel's hurdles, which she has had to do, to write a report and present something and present an LC whip that can in the future attract funding is no mean feat, and it's taken years Michelle's life, I think, but she's done extraordinarily well in getting this far with it. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. I do think, I actually think it's quite an encouraging consultation response, because very often consultation responses end up with lots of people writing in saying what a bad idea something is. This one was lots of people writing in saying what a good idea it all is, and not just on Sheppey and the bits I represent, but elsewhere. So I'm very pleased that it contains the amendments that have been suggested by the consultation. It does prove that the council's listened and acted, which is a bit of a mantra of mine. The proposal is in line, as Michelle said, with the previous decision of this group, to this committee, to include CW7 and extend it through to Laysdown, which I think is the right one. It dovetails perfectly in with KCC's own local transport plans and government's requirements for funding, as I've said, and it supports many aspirations of the draft local plan in respect of active travel and getting people out of cars onto cycles and walking. It also, of course, it becomes a material consideration when our planning officers are talking to developers and developers are developing land, that they can say to them, well, there's a line across that bit of land and we'd like you to put a cycleway in it, please, as part of your development. They can't do that at the moment, but if you nod this or vote for this tonight, from tomorrow they'll be able to, which I think is a really important thing. And most importantly, Chair, it resonates with what the public have told us and what the public, and I just hope that colleagues will vote and support it tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just ask a couple of questions myself, Councillor Jason? I'll bring you in. My concern is that so often we produce documents at SWAL, and the most efficient route for that document is being reassured that actually it goes on to inform lots of different areas as opposed to just one. So I'm happy that this will pull down funding. What I'd be even happier about is if this document was taken on at some level in the local plan. So, for example, it'd be nice to see it cited, but it would also be nice that as we have declared a climate emergency through this committee, that actually when we're looking at elements regarding the local plan, like where we're going to put development, like where we're going to, for instance, support parking and all of those sort of things, it would be really nice to have this document shoved under the relevant committee's nose as well, because I can absolutely tell you things that will support goals through the local plan. You've looked at CWR2, which is the route from Cromwell Road to Marine Parade, absolutely highlights the need for a crossing element of that coastal road. Local community have been crying out for it. It would absolutely support walking and cycling in that area much easier. It would support the school. It would support all sorts of things. Can we at least ask the question of WPG, what's it, committee? Sorry, it's a long day. Thank you. If it's possible that they take a look at the document and see if there's any way it can be considered under the elements of the local plan.
So I'm very much in contact with planning. I like to have a working lunch with planning every month or so, where we discuss the progress of this. So they absolutely know that I'm coming here today, and they have already discussed how this could be incorporated into the local plan. So I'm ahead of you there.
I'm not surprised, and bearing in mind this is the first time I've been through this local plan process, which I expect some of the officers have been through it lots of times. Martin?
Well, and just I was going to add exactly the point. If this is adopted tonight, it becomes an evidence piece to sit under the local plan, like when the Housing, Health and Community signed off the built facilities strategy or the playing pitch strategy. Eventually you'll sign off the open spaces strategy. That becomes an evidence document in the suite of the local plan. So this absolutely will bring about the change and allow the planners to use it.
Lovely. If I go with Councillor Jays, because he was first, then Councillor Whiting. Oh, is it something very specific?
It was specific to this, Chair, if I may, just very quickly, because there was a planning appeal in this very room for development on Sheppey, and I spoke and actually raised this plan And in the judgment that the planning inspector gave down when he gave his decision on his decision notice, it actually mentions, for example, the walking and cycling routes. So, in a way, it's already embedded in planning precedent, because the planning inspector has already referred to this, although it hadn't at that point been adopted. So I think it carries enormous weight.
That's good to hear. Since I started on this committee, I've been blithering on at officers, which they've accepted or not, I don't really care. And I'll continue to talk about it, that all decisions of this council, if you've declared an emergency, housing, environment, mental health, whatever have you, all key decisions of this council should be viewed through the focus of those emergencies. Otherwise, there is absolutely no point in declaring them whatsoever. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Did we get any written responses from any parish councils?
Yeah, we did. But don't ask me to name which ones they were.
Are they listed in the report?
I can find out for you, but we got one from Minster Parish Council. That's the one that stands out the most.
We should stand
Not
out.
many.
They've got a very
Oh,
good
is it
chair.
you?
They've got a very good chair.
Oh,
And vice chair. And councillors.
that's why then.
Just for clarity,
Yeah.
I think we'll hand that thanks over to a large extent to Councillor Hawkins as well, who's not in the room. But yeah, Minster have got very active councillors, yes.
I was just wondering if their proposals were all accepted into the report.
In terms, I mean, what we haven't done, and probably something that we could do, is do a "you said we did." So even though I've written on here the changes that have come about as part of that feedback, I haven't specifically said this person said this, because I think I shouldn't be saying that anyway. It should be confidential, right? So yes, we do have, because I can't see who's reply back to the consultation unless they have physically written to me, and Minster Parish Council was one of them that did, so I knew they did, but I wouldn't know who else did. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. So some of the infrastructure we're talking about here should have been part of previous Section 106 monies, but we can't change the past, we're going to change the future. And I think we've heard tonight that when developers and planners are negotiating Section 106, this will be considered. But does this form part of the council's local plan infrastructure delivery plan, or is this a separate document? Because it's infrastructure, isn't it? I know it's a separate document, but is it mentioned in the infrastructure delivery plan?
I'm guessing that comes to me, Chair.
Yes.
At the moment, there isn't an infrastructure delivery plan. That's part of the problem. So obviously, it makes it much harder for us to convince developers to give us contributions without having that. So the local plan has to come first, and then a suite of documents after them. As I say, all of these, like open spaces, play strategy, built facilities, LC WIP, will all act as the evidence pieces. But there will be, from the planning policy manager, I've had it confirmed there will be an infrastructure plan that comes after the local plan. So yes, these types of things will be listed within there.
Thank you. It's annoying that education sites were only over 500. I think that's just the national standards we have to play by, is it?
It will be, yeah, but it has been noted about what on routes where schools are located, which is part of the factor of the prioritisation of the routes.
Because a lot of the primary schools on the island are only 2 form entry, therefore 420 pupils, and they too need safer walking and cycling routes. Along the light railway path, it mentions about removing the railings along Scrapsgate Road. This would open it up to motorbikes using this as a shortcut. I think people do already, because you can get round the railings. I hope there's some sort of infrastructure there. I know in other parts of the county you find gates where you can use the radar key scheme to get through, and walkers can walk around normally. But I'll take that further down the line, more specific design work later. Yes, you're nodding, okay. What is highlighted in the report is we need better street cleansing and more bins, or perhaps better distribution of current bin stock. It's highlighted at least twice in the report, and I'm hoping going forward we'll have street cleansing in these areas and/or bins. We can try to put bins there and hope people use them, but as we see all around the borough, there's bins with rubbish laying next to them. On page 57, on CR4, along the Sheppey Way, do we know if this will be lit and a pavement installed? As this is, I wouldn't want to cycle down this in the dark.
You're getting into the detail
So
now,
it's detail.
Councillor.
Okay. So
We're not nearly
high
at that
level.
stage of design. This is
Okay.
very high level.
So just to chime in a little bit there, I think this actually plays to a bigger question that members have raised across committee now, is that the understanding of how 106 money, how ward councillors have input into what is best for their area when we're looking at development input isn't clear. It isn't a clear process. It might be clear if you sit on planning, but there's development outside of the areas of members who sit on planning. And it's okay saying, well, we've all got party members that sit on planning. They can do that job for you. They cannot. There is nothing like a local ward councillor who's lived in the area for years and years, who speaks to their residents, who knows them, to know what, like for instance, Elliot's point about needing a path in the dark. You know, a mapping tool is never going to tell you details like that. We must be impressing on every opportunity. We need the members' briefing about how 106 operates and how best ward councillors can have an input in that. Of course.
So what I would say is that if we're taking another route through to a much more detailed design level, part of the Active Travel England guidelines and how we do that with our consultants is stakeholder engagement. So, for example, if I was doing a route along East Church High Street, part of that is that I engage with the local residents, the parish council, etc. So we'll actually have stakeholder engagement in that. So that would be your way in. So, but each of the routes will be taken bit by bit. But we are talking long-term plan here. This isn't going to happen this year or next year. This involves a great deal of money. Just looking at a route between Iwade, for example, and Bell Road, that came in well excess of £8 million to get that route in. So you'd have to do it in section by section. We'd have indicative costs and we'd have stakeholder engagement. So that would be your route in. At that point, for that detailed design, can we have a light here? Can we have a bench here? Can we have wayfinding there, etc.? So it's a long-term plan.
Thank you. On CWR4, which is the route between Halfway and Sheerness, I'm hoping this will be a quick win, although it's the fifth priority. I think that half will be a quick win because you then link up with the Barton's Point to Westminster National Cycle Route. I'm sure it's just some lines on the road and possibly a parking order. Mike's gone now, but I'm sure he'll enjoy that work. And CWR5 and 8, it make a nice circular route. I'm wondering why it's two separate routes. I suppose it's got two different objectives, but it is basically a circle with offshoots at each end.
I don't know the answer to your question. But I mean, the whole point is that each of the areas have numerous routes for cycling and walking to serve different communities. So that's probably the reason why.
Okay, and on CWR7, it goes up Southsea Avenue, which is an unmade, one of the steepest roads on the island. And I know wheeled users want to be able to walk up the same route as their family, which is through or around the Little Oyster car park, and then up the slope to Seaforth Avenue. At the top of there's nice picnic bench, tables, bins, and a fabulous view courtesy of the Parish Council and Community Payback. I think it's been, and then it can connect back up with Scarborough Drive. But Southsea Ave, as the Parish Council said, Southsea Avenue is the wrong. We believe is the wrong route to go. It'd be much better if it went along where everyone else walks. It seems like we're diverting wheeled users away from this, and I don't think if the consultant cycled it, then that's amazing. But I don't think there's many people on the island that would be able to cycle up Southsea Avenue.
So what I'd say, Councillor, is that you're looking at the routes as they currently are today. Okay, so this is a feasibility about this could be a possible route, But part of that really detailed design would be it would completely need resurfacing, for example. So try not to be blindsided into what the route looks like today, because that's not the point. This is just feasibility.
So it can be changed at a later stage.
Well, that's why we'd need to go to that deeper level of design and have that stakeholder engagement. Absolutely.
No further questions. I propose this recommendation.
Thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Can I just refer to our visitor in the public gallery? Hi, Sam. Can you just give the committee your response, because you have cycled that route very, very recently. I know you have. What was it like driving your bike, riding your bike, cycling up that route? So that's I don't cycle that route. I get out of breath driving that route, to be fair. Right, so the only thing I wanted to ask is on that discussion about 106 money, we need to be actioning, if it's possible. Sorry, I will come to you, Councillor McDonald, apologies. We need to be actioning. If this is going to take such a long time in coming, we need to thoroughly explore, because some of the 106 contributions and areas that money has been held, and apparently there's unaction pots, I assume, according to other councillors, hearsay, obviously, for the benefit of the tape. We need to make absolutely sure that this money can't be actioned to something as useful as this document. I agree that money could come forward via what you're talking about, Michelle, but if there's a way of getting this work done quicker and faster via alternative routes, and I do believe it's in the council's prerogative that we should be pushing for actioning this in a more creative route if we possibly can. That's my purpose. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I've, as you probably know, I've bone of contention all the time is the huge enhancement in value of land from agricultural to residential, and I think we must give Martin and the team power to actually require, I would require it under planning, that they make a substantial contribution towards doing this, because we haven't got the infrastructure, quite frankly. It's in an awful state. I mean, when Dad was a boy, Minster was 250, and I think it's 18,000 or something now. So you can see the problem. And although I can't ride a bike now, I think it's absolutely essential, and there's too many people jump in a car like me and take the kids to school, and I think it would be much better if some of them, and a lot fitter, if they're able to use one of these routes. So if we can go along with, I think, what Martin proposed, that he would then be able to do this, I think that's absolutely essential, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McDonald. Councillor Shell.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say well done to Michelle, because she's worked really hard on this. And the meeting we had this afternoon with schools, trying to get them into active travel as well, really fits into this. And if we can link all of those pathways up, the schools should have no reason not to be encouraging their children. So with this piece of work in this afternoon, you've definitely earned your money, girl. So well done.
Lovely. Right, we had a proposer and a seconder. So Councillor James, you're proposing. Councillor Lundy, you're seconding. All in favour? That's unanimous, members. Well done. Lovely. Would members like a 5-minute comfort break? Yes, 5 minutes then. Thank you. Okay then, members, we recommence the meeting with item 11, Kent Joint Waste Management Strategy, which is being led this evening and introduced by Mr Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper introduces and recommends that Swale Council endorses the revised Kent Joint Waste Strategy, which goes from 2026 to 2031. All Kent local authorities will be taking similar papers to their decision-making bodies throughout March. I'm advised that some of the lower tier councils and the county council have already discussed and endorsed these documents at their decision-making bodies, but some others still need to go through that process, as we are this evening. Joint waste management strategies in two-tier areas are a legal requirement. In Kent, we've had such strategies since 2007. This document details how councils across Kent will deal with the challenges of the new legislative changes, such as the emissions trading scheme, extended producer responsibility, deposit return schemes, and of course simpler recycling, but also how we can best prepare for the challenges that we face under local government reorganisation. A refreshed strategy was requested by the relatively recently formed Kent and Medway Environment Members Board, bringing together environmental and waste services under a single governance structure. Swale Borough Council represented at that group at both officer and at member level. There are some clear themes within the revised strategy that officers helped to develop, and they reflect the Swale Borough Council priorities that members set when we looked at priorities for refreshing the waste contract. So in summary, the document identifies the challenges and encourages working in partnership to deliver a system-wide approach to waste management and creating a circular economy.
Lovely. Members, have we got any comments or questions? Councillor Jones?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Happy to second.
Excellent. And just for members, oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson, you go first.
No, it's only just a future-proofing scenario. I think I've spoken to Martin about this. Is it likely that with local government reform within this, we'll have the possibility to manage all of our recycling and waste within our LGR, as in our new zone, if you like?
I think that's a really interesting question, a really interesting concept, and I think LGR just forces that forward more so. I think the infrastructure is certainly an area which is open to discussion. Whether we need a material recycling plant, for example, within whichever area we form under LGR, is a question still to be discussed. It might be that we can continue to share those resources over a wider area. I think everything's on the table with regards to future infrastructure, but this is certainly a vehicle by which those discussions and those considerations can take place. That whole model approach, I think, is key to offer residents the value and the savings.
So, Councillor Martin, sorry?
Well, yeah, just to add, so a unitary council will have the powers to be both the collection and the disposal authority. I guess what Alistair's saying there is the various, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 unitaries, might choose to still do disposal on a Kent-wide basis. But that's all open for discussion as part of that process. But in its rawest sense, a unitary council will both be the collection authority, like we are at the moment, and it will be able to decide how it disposes of the waste it collects as well.
So the questions that I brought up with officers before the meeting, which were answered quite well, I thought, I had 2 concerns with this document. One is that it allows us to work collaboratively with our neighbouring councils, whatever they look like, and again is fit for purpose going forward. But also I wanted to really make sure that if any decisions were made around, for example, shutting local tips, we would still have the room within this document and within what we're signing up to absolutely provide adequate challenge to those decisions if they decide to come back if that makes sense. So I've had no confirmations that they are coming back, but I've also had no confirmations that that question won't be asked at a future time. So I think it's really important that we reassure members that the document we're signing up to this evening still allows us to have adequate challenge with any future decisions coming up that KCC may require to take for whatever their reasons are. So we've had a proposer, who was proposing? Councillor Jays, seconding Councillor Nundy. Go to the vote. All in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Lovely, well done, members. And then we'll move straight on to item 12, which is update on the litter enforcement service review task and finish group. We can have an update from officers. Michelle, thank you.
Okay, so the paper that we submitted is to update the committee on a cross-party task and finish group discussion, and it's also to seek approval to proceed to tender for a supplementary environmental enforcement service in May of this year, 2026. The previous supplementary litter enforcement contract ended on the 31st of March 2025. And we undertook preliminary market engagement via the Kent Business Portal in October 2025. This presented an opportunity to us to equip our officers with valuable information to help shape the model and a wider range of offences. As such, the project has been redefined as a supplementary environmental enforcement service, which enables us a greater scope. In November 2025, we asked for a cross-party member task and finish group to be set up. Information was discussed at the first meeting in January 2026. Members were forwarded and attended the meeting, at which point we discussed what the priorities were of the members because we wanted engagement and direction. A range of offences that we did consider, we went through the engagement and debated payment rates as well as level of fines, and we also discussed other local authority models which we'd engaged with. The discussion led to us agreeing key criteria, which included a reduction in littering and dog fouling, reducing environmental harm, and a flexibility to enforce against more environmental offences as an opportunity should arise going forward. We also discussed hotspots, including attendance at rural areas as well as high footfall areas, and an ongoing review of FPN financial levels and early payment suggestions to ensure a higher payment rate of those issued FPNs. A draft operational specification was shared with the task and finish group, and it covers a wide variety of criteria that we'd like to include in the specification, which can be shared should it need be. Income from the paid FPNs will fund the scheme, and we agreed that the primary objective was to reduce the littering and dog fouling. These will be classed as core offences and the main criteria of our specification. We would also like to utilise any services, existing services of the council that we have, such as CCTV for the new officers. And the initial contract phase should focus on proven enforcement areas, and only would we expand into different offences when we were happy with the initial core. The update report is noted, and the committee agrees that the officers can finalise the specification and in consultation with the member task and finish group. As we said, other local authorities were contacted and they've helped us to share and design our model to shape it going forward. In summary, we seek approval to proceed to tender for specification for supplementary environmental enforcement service in May of this year.
Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose this. Hopefully they can move on to help with the fly posting epidemic we have, but like I say, happy to propose.
Councillor Nundy.
Yes, very good report. It's clear the working group have been doing quite a lot of, the member task and finish group, have been doing some good work. Quite frankly, the state of this borough is disgusting. It's vile sometimes when you walk around and you see the litter, the amount of dog mess that's on the street. You know, you try and go out somewhere, you're walking down a dark, poorly lit street, A lot of the street lighting, of course, isn't down to us, but you walk down it and you end up walking through all sorts of stuff. It's absolutely vile. I do think we definitely need people to go out there and actually start challenging this and putting people right and getting the monies back, getting some fines off of them to pay to clean our streets up. I fully support this. Happy to second.
So that leads me on to my question. When I've looked at the report, nowhere does it mention the amount of staff that we are looking at, because what my concern is with this sort of work, when we're looking at a third party coming in to run a contract, quite often their success will be judged on money. And actually, that means that we might see the same problem happening that we had with previous litter enforcements, where agents or people might sit outside a particular area and wait for people. And we've had issues where we've had to reject PCNs and remove the action enforcement that we would usually take. So my concern with this is that I do believe we should be ensuring that there are enough boots on the ground to adequately cover resource for the entire borough, and not be overly targeting areas where we feel that the third party company is just going to be able to show a good return financial wise. Have we done anything to ensure that that won't happen?
We've looked at multiple models, and obviously the industry and the models that are available have changed quite a lot since our previous incumbent and the specification that we held with them. The models that we're now looking at are a completely different dynamic. So they're fixed operators and a mobile support unit as well, which can be deployed to other areas. So we'd hopefully get a lot greater coverage, like we said, and also include those rural areas which the members felt were neglected.
And my other question is around when we get third party people in to cover options with regards to our contracts, are we going to really make sure that we are asking them to provide social value in this contract? So, for example, it could take the form of work experience, it could take the form of apprenticeship, it could take the form of lots of different routes. But have we applied the same level of social value as we do to our other contracts?
Yeah, so when we were looking at the different models that are currently available with other local authorities, and we engaged in the preliminary marketing, social values is one of the key criteria of any contract that we're going to do going forward. The companies that we have engaged with have provided policies and
Are we back? Members, Councillor Neil, you appear to be still online. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
I couldn't hear that. If you just spoke, I couldn't hear that, unfortunately. I think you can hear us. Hopefully. Ah, there we go. Nice to hear you. Okay, so before we did that, we were looking at social values element to the contract, which is, I think, really important, because I feel that actually, oddly enough, one of the growth areas for employment and one of the growth areas we can actually offer is in waste management. And I would like to think that any employment opportunities we do offer through the lens of waste management is a good opportunity, whatever company that we tend to hold that contract with. So we've had a proposer, we've had a seconder. Would anybody else like to have a comment? Councillor Jones?
I know you said about things have been issued wrong in the past, but when they've been issued wrong, they've been cancelled. The council's been happy to admit when things have been issued by mistake, but PSPOs are something that might go on to be enforced. Just looking at our PSPOs, I've highlighted it before, I don't think it's this committee's responsibility, but the maps are so unclear. I think we need to look at that before sending enforcement agents out. I think that was part of what one of them come across on before. It looks like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. I know it's not anyone's work here, but it doesn't help that we had to wet sign things at the time, so perhaps that hasn't helped. But I think that needs to be reviewed before we ask them to ever enforce this.
Yep, Martin.
Yeah, on that's exactly why Michelle's suggesting that we get the contractor in, focus on the core activities, and then when we're comfortable with that operation, that's when we start to add those additional ones, because litter enforcement, dog fouling, quite simple in terms of finding it. Obviously, when it comes to other environmental offences, this is what the Task and Finish group talked about, was around the complication of additional items, and there needing to be a really robust process so that we give the advice on that contractor. Just on Councillor Worcester's point, absolutely, again, the Task and Finish group made it really clear that whilst we of course need the third party to focus on the high footfall areas, because that generates the income to afford the service, what we've made clear is that the specification will ask for a fixed number of hours in other locations outside of the high footfall areas, so that you're getting that blend of both things. You want them in the areas where most littering is happening, but also you want it as a deterrent in other areas where it might not be quite as prevalent as the high street, but still an issue. So that's that way. That's why it's different to how we had it before. Before, it was the contract pays you for every fixed penalty notice you issue. This time round, we're looking at it so it will be a blend of both, so that we've got some fixed time on the ground, like we do with the civil enforcement contract. We buy 15,000 hours from APCOA at the moment. This contract will have a similar approach where we buy some hours, but they still visit the high footfall areas as well. So you get the best of both worlds.
Brilliant. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, it's only about social value. Is anyone taken on who talks to people within the areas that are of a higher problem? So with juveniles and engagement. So if someone's offering a ticket, do they do a sort of a moral conversation, or do they just give a ticket?
Sorry, wrong button. I can't comment on the exact content of the policies, obviously, because we need to put the specification out to get engagement and see documentation. But there has been discussions around education of all ages. So it would be with young persons as well as with engagement on the street or any community events. And they've got quite a lot of social engagement at the other local authorities around the area. So we can use them as an example when we go through the specification stage of any things that we would like to present or have included, or activities that they're already engaging with and getting good feedback from.
And just to add to that, of course, we've got an environmental enforcement policy that specifically looks at issuing FPNs or not issuing FPNs to people under a certain age. So any enforcement that Michelle's team would take would be in line with that policy that comes to this committee for approval as well.
Just really quickly, I obviously have brought this up for other contracts with Swale. I'm also really not interested in having heat maps as our sole way of proving people have been in an area, because obviously heat maps prove that they've been in the area, but they do not prove that they have been actually actioning work whilst they've been in the area. And I suppose that leads us to the next question, which is, how are we intending to monitor this contract as a committee? Does it come under officer delegation? Are we expecting to see a report back timely based on offering this contract out, or is that all yet to be decided? Thank you.
We've discussed monitoring of the contract as well. I think it's safe to say when the last contract was let, that it was quite new, and we've made it very clear with Michelle to that in that pre-engagement around the level of detail that we'll need coming back. On the heat maps, I absolutely understand they are only representative of the locations that they've been to. But what we're also able to do is to have a map of where they've been, but a map of where the action has actually been taken, which is what we do with the parking service. So we say this is by deployment, and this is about the number of PCNs that we've issued. So we could absolutely replicate that in the same way with this contract, say this is where they've been, but actually this is where the highest number of offences were. So I think if you combine both of those maps, then you get a much better picture than just where the deployment is.
So multiple points of reference, which is great. And just that last point of where does it come back to allow councillor oversight for the contract?
I mean, that is the wish of this committee. You can ask us to come back as often as you wish, or you can ask for the chair and vice chair to be updated. I would suggest the way that we've been going. Well, we do need a contract first, of course, yes, but
and that's my point. I don't want to.
I'm taking that as good news that we might have the okay to go ahead, but
I don't want to preempt the process.
Others, don't we?
So, for example, I'm just thinking about process. If this is supported by members this evening, you go out and look for tendering the contract, then that comes back. I'm assuming there's a way of informing this committee that you've achieved the contract. Does that come back through officer report? And then at that time, can we respectfully request that part of that officer's report is including a discussion around a recommendation around monitoring, so we've got a mechanism to allow members to discuss if they want an annual report or if they don't, being in the gift of the members, if that makes sense. Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to pick on something you said earlier. While I agree that, issuing a notice to someone because a seagull stole their chip and then dropped it is possibly a little bit extreme, at the same time, there are countries on this planet that don't have bins in public places because they have been able to push a social program. They have been able to educate people, but they don't drop litter. These countries aren't dirty. They don't have bins because citizens respect the area. I think Japan might be one of them. They don't really have bins in public spaces. There are parts of this country where you can't find bins. People don't just stand there with a bottle and go, just drop that on the floor and leave it. Most people take their litter home. And if you go to the beach, you know what it's like down on the Leas in Minster during the summer in Sheerness. Some of those bins are overflowing. But people don't just drop their litter there. Generally speaking, they take it home with them. So I really think that's the push that this council should have. As well as absolutely hammering people that are dropping litter, let's try and educate people, and let's try and really get people on board to take pride in their community, so that if they are out and their dog fails, they don't put it in a bag and tie it on the end of a tree. They just take it home or walk 500 metres extra down the road just to pop it in a bin. I don't know if there's a comm strategy that could be put out about that, but it's just a suggestion.
Maybe that's
Not relevant to this, but I
that's
just thought I'd
okay.
raise
Maybe
it.
that can be brought back at the next stage when we're actually having a look at the after tender process, when we're looking at how we're going to monitor how that's going to go forward. Last one, Councillor Jays, and then I think we'll bring this to a close.
Thank you. As Alistair mentioned, the environmental response team enforcement policy, I think it should be noted that it's due for review December this year, so I think that'll be one for the full plan come the new year of the committee, and hopefully we can get the 4 E's they used during COVID into it. The first one being education, final one being enforcement. And on the website it's listed as 12 pages, but only 8 are showing, but and it hasn't got a glossy front page, so I'm sure we can correct that.
Lovely. Councillor McDonald, very last one.
Yeah, very quickly. Litter is absolutely awful, but people just throw stuff out. But Sheerness used to be dog poo alley. But apart from that, my bone of contention is fly tipping, where they dump stuff in Elm Lane and then it costs the council to take it away. Can we make a very high fixed charge so the courts can't go and give them some stupid, very low amount? I remember some years ago at the back of Newington, somebody was caught tipping a load of, must be 10 years ago, tipping a load of fly tipping from a lorry or something. They were fined then. They were fined a huge amount of money, several £1,000s, and they had the vehicle confiscated. But I'm afraid the courts haven't really been. So if we had a high fixed penalty for fly tipping, dumping builders' bags full of rubbish, is that a possibility?
Let's refer to the officer.
Sorry, thank you.
No, after you. You press the button first.
I should perhaps let Michelle answer, but we have fixed penalty notices which members have set the fees and charges at. We have 2 tiers for fly tipping, and I believe the upper tier is set at the maximum amount already. So we do have that opportunity to issue fixed penalty notices for fly tipping. We can also take offenders to court. If we feel that the fixed penalty notice isn't appropriate, we can take people to court, and then we're within the hands of the magistrates there with regards to the fine that's received. But we did, I think just last year, through the Kent Resource Partnership, or perhaps the year before, we tried to educate the Magistrates Association with regards to the implications of fly tipping offences, and we requested that they review the penalties that and the sentencing guidances that they use. So we are trying to influence the magistrates on issuing more severe penalties when it's appropriate. I think there's a piece of work going on at the moment with regards to the government looking at additional tools to assist Michelle and her team with regards to more strict penalties. So we await the outcomes of that as well.
Okie dokie, lovely. We'll bring that back at a fly tipping element. I did promise Peter's last one.
Yeah, I'll just say, as an ex-magistrate, I dealt with many flights, and the greatest thing was seeing on their face the fine, to know that we were going to crush their vehicle. And that was the greatest thing we used to do. But in uncontrolled magistrates' courts now, a lot of these cases won't come clear court because we haven't got magistrates and we haven't got the legal advisors in the courts, so it's completely somersault.
So other than that process, which is unfortunately nothing to do with SWAL, I think we're doing everything that we possibly can. But those points are taken on board, and if you want to bring that back at a later date around fly tipping, I'm more than happy to support with writing to whoever to highlight various issues along those lines, because I agree. I believe there should be unlimited fines for people who fly tip, and I also believe there should be maximum punishment able to be handed out by any level of authority, because it's always a choice to drop litter, it's always a choice to fly tip, and it's individuals' behaviour that is there. And that's my little rant over.
Just say one thing, young.
If you're quick.
If we find someone for a litter, just dropping something on the floor, and they don't pay, they used to come to us in court, and we used to say, right, we fine you £500, but we found out they were on benefits, so the most we can take away from them is £5 a month. So that £500 takes years to pay off. So if they're on benefits.
And again, possibly future work to recommend to our MP. How lovely. Right, so we've had a proposer, we've had a seconder. All in favour of supporting or noting? It was a noting report, wasn't it? Noted? Everybody noted? Noted. Right, congratulations. That's the end of the meeting. 5 minutes, 35 minutes early. 4 people in your court. Meeting closed at 9:24. Thank you, members.